I'm a huge horror movie fan, and like most fans of the horror genre, I'm pretty picky with the films that I like. And one subgenre that has had me by the throat here for the past couple years is post-horror, or at least what I think is post-horror. The problem with post-horror is there's no set-in-stone definition for it, or at least not one I could find online. There's also a huge debate online about whether or not we should actually use the term post-horror in a community. I personally think we should, more for categorization purposes and less for it being necessary. What I personally think makes a post-horror movie is whenever a filmmaker prioritizes the story and characters over the actual horror elements. That's not to say that post-horror movies aren't scary. I actually find a lot of them scarier and more terrifying than something like Friday the 13th or the original Halloween. A list of my favorite post-horror films are It Follows, The Babadook, Killing of a Sacred Deer, and A Ghost Story. I mean, given the unofficial definition that basically everyone uses for it, yeah, but for me, in my personal definition for post-horror, no. The thing about A Ghost Story is, it's not scary and it's not trying to be scary. A Ghost Story is a character drama that revolves around a recently dead man who, as a ghost, watches his widowed wife throughout time and space. While it doesn't fit into my definition of post-horror, it definitely fits into the internet's. The existential fear is how the film paints a very grim picture of the afterlife and how we can't run from it. It's definitely scary, but not in the way that most people want. It's a lingering fear in the background that you won't think about when watching this movie, or probably anytime after. The next film I want to talk about is not on my favorites list, even though it is a movie that I like. That movie is Hereditary. The film is most commonly seen as a metaphor for abuse and mental illness, but I would also argue that there is a true horror in this movie. It's not the abuse or the mental illness, even though those are horrors and nightmares by themselves. Unlike most people who find the movie scary purely out of shock factor, for me, it was the feeling of no control. The characters would have wound up in their situation no matter what. Charlie/King Payman's soul would still be in the body of Peter, and Annie, Steve, and Peter would still be dead. These murders were thought out and inevitable, and so were the events. If you've seen it more than once, you'll know that the cult was pulling the strings the entire time, and it was right in front of you. The way this movie is built up is like the film Rosemary's Baby, where you know it's happening, you're just waiting for the crescendo, and it's still terrifying because you know there's no escape, and that's the most scary thing about Hereditary. It's not the possession, it's not the murders, it's not anything. It's the inevitability and the lack of control. I'm not here to argue whether or not post-horror is a thing or if it's the best, because every genre and subgenre has its ups and downs, and there are certainly some movies in post-horror that I do not like. I just wanted to talk about it and talk about two films in the category that shows us about how something shouldn't be in there and one deserves its spot. Please like the video and subscribe to my channel because all the support I can get on here really does help. And even though it's not the point of this video, how do you feel about post-horror? Do you think it's something that is completely arbitrary and it's something we should not use whenever categorizing horror films? Or do you agree with me that it's kind of important to be able to distinguish what horror films are what?